Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. If you're a chief executive, or if you think like one, and you want to create exponentially greater impact, then this show is for you. My name is Richard Medcalf, founder of Xquadrant. I coach some of the most successful and impressive CEOs and executive teams on the planet and help them achieve extraordinary results. And no matter how successful you've been in the past, there's always a whole new level of impact available to you. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO. Today, I speak with Peter Sweetbaum. Peter is the Chief Executive of Content and Cloud, which is one of the UK's leading technology services, solutions and support providers. Peter started off life as a solicitor, and having had a few different roles at the start of his career, he then changed sector quite dramatically, moved into tech, founded his own company, and then went on an acquisition spree to create a large integrated provider of technology services. His journey is really interesting. We get into the details of how he brought together very different companies and created something rather special out of them. So I hope you enjoy this conversation and distill some of Peter's very specific success formulae in this episode. Hi, Peter. It's great to see you today.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. Well, it's really a pleasure to have you here. I know that you've spent the last few years merging a whole bunch of kind of IT services companies into content and cloud, and it sounds that you're just at the end of a first phase of a master plan, and there's probably a whole new phase to come. So what I'd love to do today is dive in and find out how that's been going and what success you've found and what's been driving that success, right? What lessons can we learn from that? And then look a bit about the future. So before we dive into all the details, how about giving us just a quick intro, right? Who is who is the man behind the mask, right? Who is? I did a little bit of research online. I found that you harbored secret fantasies of being a lead guitarist in a rock band, and you're a latecomer to Breaking Bad. So that's what I've been able to find out. But tell us a bit more about who you are and what makes you tick, and how you got into the CEO role.
That's good research, all true, and sadly still very much a fantasy about the rock band. If I displayed my musical talent, you'd understand why. So look, I'm Peter Sweetbaum, CEO of Content and Cloud. And I guess my background is I was a lawyer and investment banker. After being a lawyer for 5-6 years, and moved into investment banking for another 5 or 6 years, and then made a lateral move into the real world in tech, which was exciting and great, not to advise but to do. And after a number of different roles, I found myself becoming the CEO of a company called IT Lab, which is what Content and Cloud was actually called until about 18 months ago when we rebranded the company.
Right, and in that journey, I believe you've actually merged a number of companies together. Is that right? You kind of grew by expansion, acquisition.
Yeah, we grew. We've done 5 acquisitions since our current investor, a private equity investor called ECI, backed us in June 2016. I joined the company in July 2014, and we did 2 acquisitions even before the private equity fund joined. But these acquisitions were about building a vision and a strategy and building an outcome. They weren't acquisitions for the sake of acquisitions. It wasn't just about doing the deal and growth.
Yeah.
They were all part of a total vision that wanted to bring to the organization.
Right. So you had the vision, and then you figured out what capabilities were missing and what scale areas and market segments, whatever else, and you started to be quite strategic, I guess, in bringing that together.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's always an element of opportunism in building businesses like this and doing a typical buy and build. But yeah, we had a vision of what we wanted to become, which was to become a significant partner in the Microsoft ecosystem within the UK, be very consultative and digital transformation oriented and led, And that influence came from my personal background when I worked for the UK government. But I understood the power of strategic engagement and digital transformation. And I started with a business which wasn't very strategic. It was very tactical. It was very focused on day-to-day service delivery. How do you take a business like that and then turn it into what is a strategically impactful organization? It was about building capability. It was about building an overall ethos, almost intellect and capital capability within the business to be able to deliver a different type of service and different level of service to more sophisticated organizations.
So it sounds fascinating, right? You had this very tactical business and you really said, okay, let's create a strategic framework to grow it. But let's just rewind time a little bit. How did you even get to be CEO, right? So and not so much the story of how, though there's probably a couple of key moments that might be worth sharing, but like, what was the secret sauce, the success factors, right? That moved you, through your career to get into this CEO role of this, high growth firm.
From being a lawyer,
yeah, exactly.
Investment banker into having moved into industry, I had a number of roles within larger corporate environments, and then 9/11 happened, and interestingly, I found myself, out of a role. I was actually with Enron for 6 months. Well-known story of Enron.
Yeah. I think you're the second interviewee on the podcast actually who's had a stint at Enron broadband. So
really.
So I don't know if it must be the alumni club. I don't know what's going on.
I'd love to know who the other person is. We can chat about that some other time. But that'd be great. It was probably an ex-colleague of mine. But I remember being headhunted at the time as well for about that time, 2001. I think it was that kind of time, right? And I remember for
getting
Enron Broadband Services.
Yeah,
in London.
Yeah.
We could have been colleagues.
There you go. Yeah, small world.
Well, but look, I mean, that's as a life experience, right? It created a dynamic in a situation through circumstance where, despite having been, frankly, an M&A lawyer and investment banker, I found myself thinking, what do I do now? Enron had, frankly, collapsed. And it was really just a moment of reinvention where somebody had actually connected to my PC from Houston to fix it. It was the first time I had seen remote access, government PC type technology, still very, very new then. And it was really a function of cycling around, I think I was at the time, thinking what's next, and saw that as a kernel of an opportunity to get into a business or create a business or, understand more about the potential for a business of using that remote access technology to provide services to companies.
Got it. Yeah. So if we go back to those kind of success factors, it sounds like there was these, at least some key moments where you actually had the chance to step back and reinvent yourself a little bit, right? And say, rather than continue on the trajectory, as so many of us do, we just keep going on what we started on. You almost by plus got forced to, but it actually helped take you onto a new path.
Yeah, exactly. And it was that opportunity to almost take a clean sheet of paper to my own career, my own life, my own vision. And I realized, more than anything else, that I continuously worked for others and I was beholden to others. And I wanted to actually be in a position where I could have more control of my own destiny at that point. And the idea of doing something entrepreneurial at that point in time, where you've kind of got the nothing to lose dynamic. So, think big, think creatively, what's out there and what was relevant at the time. And where do I think I could create, some real value and do something interesting and fun. And it was about the time where broadband was proliferating. So the combination of the broadband, the technology, the obviously driving force of technology within companies, it just created that mix of an opportunity to create something like this. And so I started it from the ground up. And literally with another guy, there were two of us, and then we added a third, added a telesales guy, and built it from there. And we built that company into something called WaveX, and I was CEO of WaveX until 2011. And that was really interesting. And it was, took something from nothing to 140 people. At that point, it was 12 million revenue, roughly. And, we were profitable, making $1.2 million of EBITDA, whatever it was. And, it was a real business. And this was, completely different, scale from anything I'd done.
So you kind of, so that entrepreneurial thing then gave you that kind of the stripes, right? To then be able to then later on in the career come in as a CEO of a business and build it and continue to have that mix of the executive management piece and the entrepreneurial piece, which is, I guess, what I'm hearing in what you're currently doing. Yeah, that's great. So what about so if I was to ask somebody, on your team, say, like what's Peter's gift? Like what's the unique thing that he brings into the mix? What would that be?
I think they would say probably a capacity to unify the organization around a vision, and to support and enable the organization to execute on that vision. I've often found myself in a situation where with the team, there's surprise, some element of doubt as to the fact that we can achieve the goals that we were setting for ourselves. And, I sat in one meeting when one woman looked at me not long after we acquired the business, and I said, we're going to be a 10 million EBITDA business in 3 years. And she looked at me and she said, that's just insane. And had no sense of belief. And about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, she said, we did it. And I said, we did it. And that's the great thing, is being able to set a vision and a destination and help people understand how we're going to get there, and give them the support and put in all the functional capabilities to enable them to achieve that, and us to achieve it collectively.
Hello, it's Richard here with a quick interlude. These conversations are all about upgrading how you think about creating impact. So here's a resource to help you do just that whilst staying fast and focused. The CEO's checklist for challenging times is a quick way to enhance your thinking and detect blind spots, even when things are moving incredibly fast and you're not sure what's going to happen next. You can get this powerful checklist of 17 world-class strategies by heading to xquadrant.com/go/challenging times checklist, with a hyphen between each of those three last words. Now, back to the conversation. Well, before we dive into that, because I think there's this we can then mine in that around that idea of turning vision into reality. What would be the dark side, right? So if people were to bitch about you, on your team, right? If they're going to kind of say, he's great at this, but the dark side of some of this is this. What might that be?
I think it's a corollary to the vision. I think it's the degree of endless ambition and drive, and that it can sometimes and will inevitably, drive the organization, harder than some people might like from time to time. But we're in the tech industry, and frankly, I have a very firm view that if we don't look demonstrably different in some way every 3 months, then we're probably going backwards in this industry. And therefore, there is a sense of constant momentum and propulsion. And, I think some people might find that a bit fatiguing after a while, but I think it is about that, constant momentum that is necessary.
Yeah, well, you're right. Yeah, I think in tech, things are changing so fast. There is that. Okay, well, let's dive into this point around vision, right? So, I'm just thinking where we should go from here. I think I'd love to understand. You just before the show, you were saying that there's been a bit of a big plan, and even just now you were saying that you took this very tactical focus organization, you started to have a vision for it, and you had to make various moves, I guess, to take you from where you started in 2017 to kind of where you are now 4 years later. So just a very high level, like what was the different, what was A and B, what was A to Z, what was like the beginning and end point of that, and some of the key milestones along the way, just to get a sense of this transformation, how big it was.
I think ultimately it started with what I call user need and thinking about the customer and trying to match the customer need and desire with the technology industry evolution, and being able to look forward and see in 3 to 4 years what the expectation of the services and requirements of our customers would be, and what an optimal business would be delivering and what an optimal business model would be at that point in time, and being able to define and shape that in more tangible terms for the organization. So what are the services, what are the skills, what are the capabilities we're going to need to have then? How big can we be at that point? And then almost deconstructing that backwards to say, how do we think about the capabilities and skills and the organizational scaling to get us to that place?
But in terms of the actual, like, from and to state, so when you started in 2017, I think you said, like, how many people were in the company and how many are here now? What were the revenues? What was just kind of the scale of the difference between where you started and where you are now?
Sure, more tangibly. So when I joined, what was then IT Lab in 2014, it was about 130 people. In 2017, when the vision was reset, and this was after our private equity investor invested, and I presented a 3-year plan, the strategy. We were about 300 people at that point.
Okay.
About 32 million of revenue, I believe. Today we're at about 800 people and just under 100 million of revenue. So,
okay. Yeah. So in 4 years, you've more than tripled the revenue. You've 2x, 2.5x the people. So yeah, it's been a really big change. And in those 4 years, you integrated a number of other companies into the business. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we did is put together. We grew organically very successfully. So the organization itself, the core of it grew, and that required rethinking the model, the target operating model, the organization and its structure. We had acquired a series of businesses, and I think, unlike the vision that people have or the misconception people have around acquiring businesses and rolling them in fast, we actually did very much the opposite. Every deal that we've done, we've taken time, real time, to get to know the organization, to get to know the people, to work together, and then collectively work through how do we get the best out of the combined organization, rather than rush into pushing companies together, disrupting the quality, because we bought great businesses. We bought fantastic capability. And this is a different dynamic for doing strategic acquisitions than kind of market share type acquisitions.
Yeah.
So very much respecting the businesses that were coming into the group and collectively working with them to define the best outcome.
Yeah.
So
yeah, fascinating. I just talked to a leader a few weeks ago who was completely fed up leaving his organization because they were pursuing a growth by, a very ruthless growth by acquisition strategy, where, he said, actually, like, the sense of vision has gone out the window, right? There's no sense of purpose. It's purely financially driven, and it's just this kind of machine of we acquire, we bash heads together, we create a lot of pain, in his own words, right? And nobody's happy, but we get the cost savings, at some level, and then we move on and do the same again. And he says it's just a miserable existence. And you're looking, going, well, what am I, what am I doing it for? What's the purpose of this? Apart from some financial results somewhere.
Exactly, it's quite soul destroying. I mean, the whole idea of doing this through financial engineering, to me, is basically cul-de-sac. right? Because you're not creating anything that has any greater growth potential. You're eking out more cash and more EBITDA, but you're not changing the dynamic of the potential of the organization.
Yeah.
And every deal that we have done, every acquisition that we have done is about bringing in adjacent capability and skills with mutuality of respect and commonality of purpose. If we can create that, then we can really, really align the organizations together. And it's all about revenue synergy, not about cost synergy. So what can we do collectively? So it's really been very, I guess, iterative, intently, and intentionally. And it was only about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, but yeah, about almost 2 years ago now, we literally took out a white sheet of paper and redrew the entire organization. We had 21 P&Ls because of all the different acquisitions.
Yeah.
And we probably ripped up that sheet of paper 40 times until we came to a target operating model and a structure that made sense for the future, that everybody could buy into, and that really, really made coherent sense and aligned to the vision and strategy of the business and the offering, and has enabled everybody to buy into and get behind. So
yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so you really took the time to, I guess, listen and discuss what the future would be, rather than it being something that you imposed.
Yeah, I mean, it was genuinely a function of reflecting on what does the ultimate business look like.
Yeah.
And we have all these component parts and capabilities and how do we bring that together in a way that would be a platform, a springboard for future growth, and that's what we designed. And we were consultative. I've always been very, very open and consultative. I have a very firm human view, in a leadership sense, that we're all in the same boat, right? As a team. We may have different roles, we may have different jobs to do each day, but we're all individuals trying to achieve something collectively. And that's been a really, really important part of getting what I call collective alignment around where we want to go.
Yeah. And Peter, when you say, it sounds fantastic, right? I mean, I just love that sense of, we want to build something, it's strategic, it's bigger, we want to get everyone on the same page, we're doing this together. It's fantastic. What have been, obviously, as you integrated these different companies and you multiplied the complexity of the business, I guess there must have been some missteps along the way, things that you look back and go, that was painful, I would have done it a bit differently. I'm just wondering what the learnings might be. Like, were there some hard lessons that you had to learn as you figured this out?
The hard lessons that we've learned are more, I guess, are twofold. One is, because of what we've built had been and has been very successful, we're intensely busy. And the question is how we geared up the organization to be able to handle all that change and transformation at the same time as manage the growth. And then much more tangible and down-to-earth challenges, like, have we been realistic around the scale of the challenge, particularly things like data and data integration and bringing them together, because we've re-platformed the entire business. So we have a new technology back end to the business that's consistent across the group, and bring that all together, particularly from a data side, is a challenge. So,
yeah. Well, I remember I was I'm an advisor to a global tech company, and on their advisory board, and I just remember one of their biggest pain points, which happened just before I joined, was that they'd gone through a massive ERP standardization across their 21 territories.
Exactly right.
And it was like they had 2 years of apologizing to investors for it, right? And because it was such a painful experience, right? And it's the whole do-it-yourself thing, right? It takes longer, it's more costly and more painful than you think when you take on that kind of project.
Always, yeah. But I mean, I think I'm delighted at where we are now. We're very close to complete with that project. But if you asked about pain points, it's certainly one of them.
So. Yeah, and then I think on the busyness, it's a really key one. Thank you for mentioning it, right? Because I just see so many. We live in this world. It's kind of managing infinity, right? There's always endless stuff, right? And so you can't get out of that through productivity, right? You can only get, you have to get through that by really understanding what you want to do. What are you committed to?
Yeah.
And the whole organization to understand that and own that and get out the sense of I need to please everybody.
I think that the pandemic actually has put a different spin on that. I think that at a human level, the need to think slightly differently around that prioritization. Thinking about how individuals are managing, how they're coping, and we've seen it in all walks of life with clients internally. The struggle and the emotional challenge and the dynamic of the pandemic has changed the lens through which you look at these business priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on. Time's ticking away here. I'd love to kind of dig into your future a little bit, because no matter how much we've achieved, there's always a next level to get to.
Yes.
Right. So, how would you, Peter, love to multiply your impact in the coming years? Like, what's it, or coming months? Right. What's your next level personally?
My next level is doing the things that I think I can add greatest value to the business, and not doing the things that I don't add greatest value to, because I've got a phenomenal team to do it. I want to quadruple the size of the business over the next 4 years, 5 years, and that's a big challenge. And I have to operate differently because that kind of scale requires a different level of impact, as you say. It's like multiplier impact. So being outside of the organization and allowing the organization and the design of the organization to flow in of itself is something that I think is important at this scale for a CEO to do.
Yeah. So again, what's that transition? So I'm hearing that, you want to kind of really focus in on where you add the most value as you scale this business. You want to be a bit more outside of the operational control. So what's that kind of shift? So what do you want to do, like very specifically, if you're just thinking about it, like what do you think you want to do less of, and what do you want to do more of? What is that shift?
I think less day-to-day engagement with governance and decision making, more abstract myself to look more at the overall trends and direction of the business, and be able to give guidance to those who are owning the day-to-day decisions, and at the same time engaging with the market more externally, far more than I've had the opportunity to, particularly during this this growth phase. And ensure that the influences, particularly in such a changing dynamic market, are consistently captured for the sake of development of the vision of the business as we go forward. So I think being outside of the context of the inward looking kind of elements of my day, that has to evolve, and that's exciting.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's this idea of, I'd love to say to my clients things like what's the phone call that's going to make all the difference? Like, what relationship do you need to build? What circles do you need to move in?
Exactly.
That is going to take you to a whole new reality, right?
Yeah.
Because our circles define our reality, right? And what's if you were to what's the one idea that you're not able to have yet because you're too busy? That will emerge when you actually have a day off, even, or just to walk and think, or whatever it is. That's probably going to add more value than a whole bunch of back-to-back meetings that you've done for the last 20 quarters anyway.
Yeah, I think what's the expression? Internal incrementalism, external exploitation. So that ability to look at the external context, and as you say, what you can get from that in terms of the scale of opportunity versus the internal optic, and how incremental those individual decisions are, then the real value is out there, not as much in here.
Well, perfect. Well, hey, thank you so much for talking about that and being honest about and just talking about some of those shifts that even with your fantastic track record and what you've been able to do with this with these multiple businesses, that there's still another level, and I just find that's exciting. So thank you. If people want to find out more about you, or get in touch with you, or find out more about Content in Cloud, where do they go to do that?
Well, obviously, please go to the Content in Cloud website, www.contentincloud.com. Obviously, if you want to get in touch, feel free to do so via LinkedIn, a direct message. I'm very much on LinkedIn and very happy to engage, and very happy to speak to people.
Well, perfect. Well, hey, Peter, thank you very much. We never got to hear any of your, amateur guitar playing, but perhaps that's for next time. And it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and thanks for sharing some of your insights.
That's great. Thanks very much, Richard. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now let's talk about you. When you're in top leadership, when you're in the biggest role of your career, who supports you at a deep level as you lead others? Who helps you multiply your impact and get to the next level? If you're ready to learn more about our content, our coaching, and our community, then visit us at xquadrant.com.